Okay, now we come to adding and subtracting fractions. And as I like to say, this is the hardest of the fractions. So if you are simply trying to add straight across, that's an easy thing to do, and this is hard. So that's a big clue to yourself that you are doing it wrong. So you need to remember, do not do it the same way as the other ones. You have to use different rules. These are not the same. Do not simply add across. That is not how you do it, okay? What we need to do is we have to have common denominators. There are some times where you're already going to have a common denominator, which is great. So if we are looking at something like 3/9 plus 2/9. These bottom numbers, if they're the same, that's great. All you need to do is worry about the numerators. So it's going to be 3 plus 2 over 9. When you have the same bottoms, you don't have to touch them. You don't do anything with them. You're going to always keep that same denominator. So if they are common, they look identical, it just gets written again. So it is 3 plus 2 over 9, which is 5 over 9. The common mistake that kids do is they will say 3 plus 2 is 5, and 9 plus 9 is 18, which is wrong. So these common denominators, you just write it down because it's going to be the denominator in your final answer. It gets more complicated when you do not have common denominators to begin with. So let's look at a couple examples. If you had 4, 6, and you are going to be adding that to 5/8. These denominators are not the same. They are not common. So we cannot start our adding of the numerators until we have got a common denominator. So we could simply multiply 6 and 8 together. That would be a common denominator, but it would be a larger one, which means we're going to have to simplify in the end. So we want to find the smallest one possible. So if you start with your smaller number and go through its multiplication table until you find a number that 8 will also equal, you can choose that number. So if this was 6, 12, 18, 24. 24 is a number that 8 also shares. So I just kind of looked at 6 and looked at its multiplication tables and said, you know what, 24, a 6 can turn into a 24, so can an 8. So now this is my common denominator. I'm just going to write it down one time. But we have to go back and we have to change our fractions. 6 into a 24, that happens by multiplying it by 4. So if I want to change the bottom, I have to change the top in the exact same way. So 4 times 4 is 16. Over here, an 8 to a 24, that's being times by 3. So 8 times 3 is 24. 5 times 3 is 15. So we have 16 plus 15 is 31 over 24. That is improper. 24 fits in there one time. 7 left over 24. Now I want to kind of go back to this problem. The reason why I write this 24 here is so that you accidentally don't add the denominators to. This problem most students learn in 5th grade as being 16 over 24 plus 15 over 24. And they go ahead and multiply across and they get 31, but here's where they make their error. This is the no answer. They get the error because they want to also add straight across and they end up with 48, which as we can see is wrong because that's not the answer. The answer is 31 over 24 because once you have your common denominator, you don't add them again. You keep that common denominator, 24. Another problem here. 9/10. This time we're going to do a subtraction. Addition and subtraction have the same rules, which is kind of nice. Addition and subtraction are opposites of each other. So I'm looking at these bottoms. I can't change a 10 into a 15 or vice versa, but I know there's a number they can both change into, and that number is going to be 30. If you multiply them together, it could also be 150, but 30 is a much smaller number, so I prefer to work with that. I changed the 10 into the 30 by multiplying it by 3, so I need to do the top by 3. You're always going to see on these fractions how you change both the top and the bottom by the same thing. So that will be 27, take away, times by 2, times by 2. We're going to get on the top, you're going to get 6 on the top. Both of these on the bottom become 30. That is your common denominator. You keep your common denominator there once you've got it. 27 take away 6 is 21. 21 is an odd number, however, there is a term that can fit into there. 3 goes into there. 3 also goes into 30. 3 goes into 21 7 times, and it goes into 30 10 times. So 9/10 take away 3/15 equals 7/10. As you can see, if you were to subtract straight across, it would not equal the same number. And if you multiply or subtract straight across on the top, again, you don't get that same number because you have to find common denominators first. Just 2 more problems for you, and then we are done with yucky fractions. Trust me, I feel your pain. I'm not a big fan of fractions, but we do use them in everyday life, especially if you are in any sort of industry where you are building something, such as a contractor, an engineer, work on construction, if you're making clothing even. So if you want to be a fashion designer, you definitely use a lot of fractions and proportions. So here we go. There is a shortcut, and I don't want it to confuse you, but when you are adding is the only time I'd allow you to do the shortcut. If you look here, we can add our whole numbers and then work with our fractions. 2 plus 3 is 5. And then our answer is just going to be that plus these fractions here. So we've got 1/4 plus 2/3. 2 plus 3 is 5, and then we just need to add on our fractions. So our fractions here need to have a common denominator. If you look at a 3 and a 4, instantly the number 12 jumps out at me. To change this into a 12, I multiplied the top and the bottom by 3. So timesing the top by 3, I'm going to get 3 plus, timesing the top and the bottom by 4, 3 plus 8, 8, 9, 10, 11. That gives me 11/12. This is where kids make error because they want to just give me 11/12 as the answer. But you can't forget, you've got to add this 5 back on there. So your answer is actually 5 and 11/12. Little bit confusing. That's why I prefer to do improper fractions instead. So I'm just going to do that same problem really quickly with improper fractions instead. So we've got 2 and 1/4. I would have made that 2 times 4 is 8 plus 1 is 9. 9/4 plus 3 times 3 is 9 plus 2 is 11/3. I would have made my common denominator as 12, which is timesing the top and the bottom by 3 over here, the top and the bottom by 4 over here. I would have gotten 27 plus 44. Let me quickly do some math off to the side here. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is 71 over 12. The 12 fits in there, you guessed it, 5 times with 11/12 left over. Okay, one more problem. 4 take away 6/7. The very first thing I would do is I need to change this whole number into a fraction, so I'm going to put it over 1. I'm going to have 4 over 1 subtracting 6/7. 1 and 7 are not common denominators, so I need to make a common denominator, and that common denominator can be 7. So to make a 1 into a 7, I'm timesing it by 7. I'm timesing the top by 7. 7 times 4 is 28. Take away 6 is 22 over 7. 7 fits into 22 3 times. 7 times 3 is 21, so I would have 1 left over, put it back over 7. And that is the very, very end of the yucky fractions. And after we're done with fractions, we're going to start moving on to decimals. And then it is the end of our quarter. So if you have any questions, let me know.